In the late 1970s, music was on the cusp of a sonic revolution. Disco, Motown, soft rock, hard rock, and the first wave of heavy metal had ruled the airwaves for the better part of the decade. But as the 80s drew closer, the emergence of more experimental and musically diverse sounds would thrive in a culture desperate to shake up the status quo. A part of that was the creation of a brand new genre of music that would steadily evolve and find its footing over the next 2 decades, that being hip-hop. 6 years prior, in 1973, DJ Kool Herc threw what became known as the first hip-hop party in the Bronx, where the idea and structure that would lay the foundation for this new style of music were first put into practice. But the genre wouldn't fully be realized until one man stepped up with a vision to completely shift the dynamics of music production. And that man was Roger Curtis Linn, the man behind the Akai MPC sampler. But before we jump forward to that, we have to talk about what came before: Linn Electronics. Now, in 1979, Roger Linn and his business partner, Alex Moffett, founded Linn Moffett Electronics, which would soon be renamed Linn Electronics. They quickly went to work developing Linn's design for a drum machine that utilized digital samples. The intention behind this was to give solo musicians, particularly those working in smaller makeshift studios, the option to fully create a musical composition without the need for additional musicians. Now, the first iteration of this sampler was called the LM1, short for Linn Moffett 1. Now, Roger Linn would then utilize the LM1 to perform on the album Life and Love from musician/songwriter Leon Russell that same year. Now, in 1980, Linn released the LM1 to the public, and the LM1 was the first drum machine to use samples of a real drum kit, which Linn recorded with Los Angeles session drummer Art Wood. Some early examples of the LM1 in use can be found on recordings by Prince, Gary Newman, and Michael Jackson during that period. Now, Moffett would leave the company in 1982, coinciding with the name change to Linn Electronics. 2 years later, in 1982, Linn would release his next creation, the Linn Drum, successor to the LM1. And the Linn Drum included several improvements like the addition of crash and write cymbal samples. However, there was one way in which it was inferior to its predecessor. It was only capable of tuning the snare, tom, and conga samples, while the LM1 allowed every single sound to be individually tuned. Nevertheless, the Linn Drum was fairly popular due to its use of high-quality samples, as well as its flexibility and affordability. In fact, its sales surpassed both its predecessor, the LM1, and its successor, the Linn 9000, combined. The Linn Drum was used in countless musical recordings throughout the 1980s, including global hit Take On Me from Norwegian synth-pop band a-ha. 2 years later, in 1984, came the Linn Drum successor, the Linn 9000. Now, this was the very first integrated digital drum machine and MIDI sequencer. This model had several new innovative features like dynamic sensitive rubber pads, and would go on to influence many drum machine designs in the following decades, even into modern day. The Linn 9000 can be heard on Michael Jackson's 1987 album Bad, particularly in the songs Liberian Girl and the namesake title track. However, chronic software bugs in this model led to a reputation for unreliability, and along with its successor would significantly contribute to the company's demise 2 years later. But we're not quite there yet, as Linn would release 2 additional models before the company's dissolution. Now, 1 year later, in 1985, Linn released the Linn Sequencer, a rack-mount 32-track hardware MIDI sequencer. However, no improvements were made to this model, with it utilizing the same flawed operating system as the Linn 9000, once again leading to a reputation for unreliability. Now, 1 year later, in January of 1986, Roger Linn and Linn Electronics debuted the Linn Drum MIDI Studio. Now, this model was essentially a rack-mount version of the Linn 9000 with some improvements, but once again, it primarily utilized the same flawed operating system used in the Linn 9000. However, this product never went into full production outside of its test model, as Linn Electronics would go out of business the following month. Although this model was never released, its design more than any of the previous ones would go on to influence Linn's next invention, the MPC. Now, after officially closing its doors in February 1986, the remnants of Linn Electronics were purchased by another company by the name of Forat Electronics, owned by sound designer Bruce Forat. The company would fine-tune and upgrade the Linn 9000, now rebranded as the Forat F9000, and would continue to sell it along with the Linn sequencer until 1994. They also continued to provide repairs and upgrades for all of the original Linn Electronic products, even to this day. And with that, we end the first chapter of our MPC history series. Now, I know that in this episode we technically haven't covered any history of the MPC yet, but I thought it was important that this first installment highlighted the early work of Roger Linn and how his first wave of inventions would ultimately lead to its production. Join me next time for part 2, where we dive into Roger Linn's next endeavor, his collaboration with Japanese company Akai, and the birth of the Music Production Center.